Okay, it is 5 o'clock. This is the policy committee meeting of the Lamar CISD board, and we have 3 things on the agenda. First thing is the library book selection process.
All right.
Dr. John, you have a presentation.
I've got a presentation and all sorts of great things to chat with you about. So I want to start off just a reminder of where we started with this. Back in January, we pulled together a committee of parents, teachers, students, librarians, campus administrators, district administrators to look at our current procedures and policies for library book selection. And that committee met those 4 times, came together and came up with a procedure document to officially define this is the way we select library books in LCISD. That was presented to the board in March. And then since then, some new adventures have come out. And so in April 11th, TEA published a recommended policy for EFB local. On May 16th, the Texas Association of School Boards published recommended policy for EF, EFA, and EFB local. And then from that, I reconvened as many of the committee members that could come together as quick as we could to review all of those documents to try and figure out what works well for us, what is going to be the right thing for LCISD. I want to make sure that we all understand what all of this is because it's a lot of letters here. So EF is our current local policy, and that includes instructional materials and library books. So it's all encompassing in a single policy. But then there is the option to do an EFA and an EFB policy. So EFA would pull off just the instructional materials, so things that for classroom use, and then EFB would be specific for library materials. So it would be 2 separate policies. Looking at the work that we've done up to this point, we're recommending to you all that we do move forward with a split EFA and EFB policy. And I'm going to talk through a lot of that stuff tonight so you have a really great understanding of all of those pieces. So you have a fantastic binder, just full of great information inside of here. And so I want to just to guide you through this. On the left-hand side, you have this document that kind of walks you through what each of the tabs is. And this will be important for you later on whenever you're not listening to me talk and you're trying to remember what were each of these tabs and why were they important. Our committee primarily focused at looking at EFB, the library procedures. And so I'm going to review those key differences and some of the committee feedback with you in just a second. But I also want to point out number 4 on the 4th tab on here is TASB's EFA local policy. So if we move forward with recommending an EFB policy, we also have to in turn approve an EFA because we need to be able to approve instructional materials as well. We're not recommending any changes to what TASB provided from EFA. It's very similar to what we currently do right now. Our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning has looked over that. It lines up with exactly what we do right now, so no concerns there from our perspective. But of course, you would want to look at that and make sure you've looked through that. And then number 8, tab number 8, is a clean version of where we've gone through and said these are the key elements we've seen from the TASB recommended policy, the TEA recommended policy, and combined it together. That we're not recommending solely one policy or the other. We're recommending that the combination of the 2. And so I want to talk through that combination of some of the key elements for you. So this is where you're going to find in tab 7, I believe, this lovely chart. So this chart walks through, it has key elements found in both of the policy recommendation documents and our current policy, and it outlines, was it found in this document, was it found in this document, was it found in this document. The color coding even means something. You're welcome. Details, that's my game. Orange means essentially the same thing was said between them, but they used a little bit different words. Yellow means you can actually find a word-for-word match between the 2 different documents. Later on, you're going to find other colors like kind of a purpley pink. That means it was only found in that single document, and so that's a unique item to that. And I think at the very end, you'll find a key that talks through, hey, here is what each of these colors mean. So those 3, I covered them. I knocked it off. Good. So I'm going to scroll through this and highlight some of the big keys where there were differences and where we landed with what we're recommending in our policy. Okay. So scrolling through, you're going to see it here at the top. There was a lot of similarities with all of the documents in our current policy. Lots and lots of things were very, very similar. But whenever we get down to here, row 28, I think this is going to be about 3 pages in at the very top. Protection from inappropriate material, the penal code there, and then protection from inappropriate material as an offense to district inappropriate material, or I think that should say distribute inappropriate materials. Those items were both found in TEA. The first one was found in TEA and TASB's document. The second one was found in TEA only, and our committee looked at both of those and felt that would be a good add to our district policy to include both of those items. So both of those items are included in the recommended policy that you're going to see. Yes, sir.
So what are those numbers on the side, TEA, TASB?
Absolutely. So TEA column means that was a vote for the TEA wording of that.
And the internal vote?
And the internal vote, and the committee vote, yes, sir. And then TASB, that's the vote for that. And then no. If they looked at it and they said, I don't think that should be in our policy at all, whether that's because it's in our procedure document or it was they just didn't recommend it being included at all. That's what those numbers mean. In the document that you have, you also see notes. So I asked everybody to scribe any notes they had about their thoughts, and so you can see those. But for the sake of readability up here, I've excluded that, and you can dig into that later if you like. So those 2 items are included inside of the document. Continuing on, districts shall establish means, that's at the top of the next page, means for parents and the public to review holdings, including information about titles and how materials are assessed. The committee on that one really liked the way TASB referenced that inside of the document. The key there is having ways for parents to be able to view materials, and we have that through our online library management system. And we can publish how we select our titles. But then the second item there, this was unique to the TEA document, that parents' preview of new books will be offered 10 days prior to books being available for student checkout. If you look at some of the notes there, the committee felt that wasn't necessary. A big concern is we want to get books in kids' hands, and so that 10 days is 10 days that it's not out there. Creates a procedure that we now have to follow and make sure that we're checking off that. We receive books regularly, so it would be 10 days for this book. Well, now we have an order that's come in this month, so 10 days for this book. And so the thought from the committee was the idea of our parents have access to review what we have. They can go in and research that on their own before putting a hold on it. Yes, sir.
Dr. Jones, can you tell us who was at that committee meeting that night? Was it the combination of staff and
Yes.
parents?
I had parents that were there. I had librarians, teachers, campus administrators, and didn't have district administrators at that meeting because it did coincide with a
How many parents were there that night?
I think it was two parents that were specific as parents in that role, but we have many of the librarians that are also parents in our district.
Sure.
So, okay. So that was the thought on that idea of not wanting to extend that beyond that because parents would have access.
Dr. Jones, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So everything that we're talking, just for, since I know it's being recorded and people will watch it, so everything we're talking about tonight about adding, can we talk about what was there prior to, and then what, like these are the ones we're talking about right now?
Sure.
About that if it wasn't there, that now this is a new addition to this.
Absolutely. So if you see that it's blank in column C, EF local, that would be an addition to our policy. That is something that did not exist prior to. And so these would be additions to what we do right now.
So everything we're talking about now is an addition to?
For the most part, yes, sir. Yeah.
And you'll just highlight later on when we get to it, it was already in there, and it's just
Yes, sir.
maybe a change a little bit.
Yes, sir.
But right now, everybody can assume what we're talking about now is going to be new.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
All right. So continuing on, looking at some of these items, selection criteria, these were items that were common across our current policy already and considered things that we should include. Then whenever we get into some selection criteria, I've got some notes in the final document that you can view as to some thoughts about including these or not, because these were kind of split decisions. Most of the split decisions there was mostly because, hey, this is best practice, this is what we already do. And so some of the committee felt, well, why does that need to be in policy? That's what we do already. My opinion is if it is best practice, why not include it in policy so we are notating, yeah, this is best practice that we need to include this. One item that the committee unanimously said they did not like in there was the mirror selections found in neighboring districts or libraries in the region. That was included in the Texas Association of School Board policy recommendation. The committee did not like that. They felt every library is different, and we should not say that just because our district next door has this book means we should have that book. Or if the district next door doesn't have that book, we shouldn't have that book. We want to make sure that we are basing decisions for our community and our students. So that one was a unanimous one on there. So continuing on, most of these items, so these items here, this selection criteria, number 43 through 47, these are items that are specific to our procedure document. So they do not conflict with any of the policies, and some of them are more strenuous than what is in these policy documents. But since it's a procedure, we can update those as we need it a little bit easier if we find this needs to be like this instead. But we didn't feel that those necessarily need to be in there as policy. Selection criteria, recommended age ranges for library materials. TEA's document had a recommended age range. Our procedure document also had a recommended age range. Our recommended age range was actually a little bit more granular than what TEA's document was. So we felt that our recommended guidelines were a little bit better because it met the more specific needs of our individual students. And then this section talks about purchasing. And so this is where there were some, for the most part, leaned one way, but it wasn't unanimous by any means. The first item on there, purchasing. Material must be read, reviewed, and recommended by library coordinator or designees. That is found in the TEA document, and my understanding of what that means is that any new title that's added to LCISD libraries would have to be read before it goes onto our shelf. To put some context to that, in Lamar CISD last school year, we added over 20,000 new titles. Mm-hmm. These are new to the district. They've never been on a shelf before. I did some rough math to make an estimate of how much effort that would take. And if we hired somebody, if we said it took an average of 2 hours to read every book, some books are going to take 5 to 10 minutes. Some books are going to take 8 to 10 hours because of just the length of those books. To hire somebody, you can find this in the TASB document towards the end of the packet that I shared with you. It would be costly. To do that, we would need to hire 26 and a half staff members just to read 7.5 hours a day. And the committee all felt that yes, this would be wonderful. This would be really, really valuable. But that's a very large financial impact to try and read every single book and hire that many people to just read books. So the committee across the board said no for those on there. But there is still the thought of, boy, it would be nice if we could do that. Yes, sir.
Dr. Jones, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about libraries. We're talking about books that go on shelves in libraries.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about the cost of reading a book that goes on a library shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And that's too time intensive and labor intensive. We're talking about minors that check these books out. So from the committee's perspective, why would we not read books that go on a library shelf for minors in a library?
I don't think the committee is saying that we shouldn't read any of the books that go on our shelves.
Right.
I think the committee is saying that we cannot read every book that goes on our shelves. That our librarians are definitely reading books that they're purchasing and putting on our shelves, especially if they're award winners. Those are going to be ones that our librarians are probably going to be reading because they're going to want to know why it was an award winner. Why would a student be interested in those books? So I don't want you to hear me say that we're not reading any books that are going out there. It's about the scale of what that statement means. That the library team, in conjunction with their other responsibilities of supporting their campus, supporting instruction, supporting students, they can't just read books all day. It's just not possible. And so that's what I mean by that. If we were going to say we're going to read every single book, we would have to find a different solution for that.
And this may sound like an ignorant question, but is there that much new material that comes out in this country every year that needs to be on the shelves of a public school library? Because the stuff that's done from the past most of it is pretty good stuff, pretty good literature, pretty good, I mean, you can never have an encyclopedia, the old-fashioned encyclopedia that keeps up with the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that would not necessarily need to be updated in the library. So is there that much new material and that much old material that is being replaced, that we're getting 20,000 titles?
There really is. That it's all about making sure that we're keeping our collections current and up to date to keep up with the interest of our students. Because the Texas State Library and Archives Commission says that the average age of your collection should not be older than, I think it's 18 years old. And so whenever you think about some classics like Harry Potter, like let's say Harry Potter's a classic. I'm not saying that's a classic, but Harry Potter, that's a popular book for sure, that you would expect to see in many libraries. That book is 20 years old. And so if you have those books in your library, you now need some newer books on the other end that are more current, that are going to be of interest to our students. Thinking about what my kids are interested in right now. They're interested in electric scooters. My kids want an electric scooter. And so finding a character that is riding an electric scooter is going to help them be more interested in reading and the content of that book. So having characters that reflect that are important. So it's all about developing that collection that really interests our students, so they're going to want to read. At the end of the day, it's about wanting to get our kids to fall in love with reading, and that means you have to have a current, up-to-date collection, and there's a lot of books that are published every year. Now, some of those books are nonfiction books of things that are being updated every day. But there's still that idea of, no, there's a lot of new fiction that's going out there. Whenever you consider the fact that we're a fast growth district and we add new schools every year, we're going to be, that helps with the adding total number of titles, because we're going to be buying a lot of new titles for those campuses. And that's going to include some more recent publications for sure. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So that was the concern there. That would be the cost estimate that I came up with was $2.2 million to hire that many staff members to read every single book. Now it moves on to the approval process. So the committee, generally speaking, felt that these were not necessary as well. That the first item on there is approval of all library orders approved by the library coordinator. I will say in practice right now, if it is a purchase with district funds that come from the central office budget, I do approve those orders. But campus orders go directly through the campus principal, who approves those orders. And our librarians should be following the library book selection procedure and making sure that every book that they purchase meets those requirements. And the principal should be double checking that that's been done. The next items on there, the next 5 on there, is the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve new book purchases. They have the opportunity to review books for 15 days prior to approval. Board of Trustees approve all library material purchases. Those 3 right there is the idea that the school board that you would receive a report of, here are all of the books that is being requested to be purchased, and you would have to approve all of those individually to say, we're okay with these books being purchased. If you saw a title that you had a concern with, the way TEA's document referenced it would be, you would submit it back and say, I would like some more information on this book, and we would have to gather that for you quickly to say, this is why we recommend it be in there. The committee felt that based on our new purchasing procedures, our selection procedures, that this wasn't necessary, that we have really great procedures set in place to do our very best to get the best books inside of LCISD. And our goal is, again, to try and get books quickly for our kids. Still following good practices to ensure we're getting good books, but trying not to slow it down as much as we can to get good books for our students. So that's the idea behind that section.
Maybe you can talk about what our policy has been up to this point, how these books got in the library in the first place versus what the administration is recommending going forward. What kind of backstops are there to prevent this kind of things?
I think the key is the difference is we have a new library book selection procedure.
That was done in March.
That was done in March. And so looking at from that's the stop point from here on out to see how do we do in catching things going forward if we have things to catch. I also think it's important to consider scale of, how many books are we concerned with versus the total number of books we have in our libraries. We have a lot of books in our libraries. Total across LCISD, we have over 500,000 titles in our libraries. That's not unique titles, but that's total books. Let's say 20% of that is unique titles. That's 100,000 books. Right now we're reviewing 8 books, kind of waiting for all of the review procedures to be in there. So 8 books out of that total would be a very small percentage out of the total. I'm not saying any percentage is okay, but I do feel that we have very strong procedures to try and keep as much things that should not be making on our shelves as possible.
Since you've put this in place in March, have we removed books or have we just relocated them to the appropriate libraries?
Right now we've not. So the selection procedures is for purchasing of new books. Right now the books that we're going to be reviewing, those 8 books, those I think are mostly at the high school level, and so if we decide they're not appropriate, those would be removed.
So again, the reason that we don't want to give a list of all new material to the Board of Trustees 30 days before is what?
Primary concern is just making sure that I don't know that we would be able to do that every single month for the board to approve. I don't know about that piece. So we would maybe have to, I believe the way it's written in the TEA document is it's recommended for a spring purchase and a fall purchase. And so the primary concern is making sure that we can get books in the hands of our kids. Great books that aren't just sitting there waiting for approval to move forward. The idea is we have a very stringent selection procedure, and that we would seek your trust to say, yes, we trust that you're following good procedures, let's move forward with this.
I look at it a little different. I look at it from the perspective of, if you give it to us, we can put it out on the internet for the public. And that brings a lot more readers to it. That brings a lot more people to the table potentially.
Mm-hmm.
You can have books on there that no one's ever heard of course, and no one's ever read, but somebody might go, wait a minute, I've heard about that book. It's got a lot of hate in that book.
Mm-hmm.
It really disparages a certain ethnic group or something. There's 3 or 4 pages that kind of between the lines, but it really comes out bad for that group.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be very, very good. I don't know what you guys think. I just feel like it opens it up to a little bit more transparency, and we're talking about a 30-day delay
Mm-hmm.
to get a book in a library that might be there for 18, 20 years. I don't see that really being a problem. You guys have any thoughts?
I would say that right now we have 500,000 titles that are listed for our parents to review. And those have been listed for a period of time. And I mean, I would, of course I want more parents involved in seeing and being involved in their kids' learning and seeing what information and data and all that stuff to be. Every month, I don't know if we would be able to do that. But
Well, my idea, I'm not going to personally go and read all those books. What I would do is I would take that list and I would put it on social media, on my platform, and maybe the district can do the same. And that would bring a lot more people who are on top of this issue to the table and say, wait a minute, I'm not going to go and read them all myself either.
Yeah.
So, but
I see that the district already does this in a sense. We have all of our lists and our books available to the public to see or read, right?
Any parent can
Any
log
parent
in
can
and
log in and
see
see.
all of the books that are available in their campus library. We don't have it as a beforehand, that you can see here is all the books that are being considered for purchase ahead of time. But they can definitely see, any parent can see any book that's on their campus library.
I guess I'm the board member that trusts y'all. I trust you to do your job. That's what I'm supposed to be doing, is to oversee that you're doing the job you're supposed to do, and Dr. Nivens is overseeing that too. And I only worry that everything someone reads is their perspective. It does not mean what I read, or what you read, or what 5,000 people read, everyone's going to come to the same conclusion. You can get feedback, but that doesn't mean that's a poor book to have in our part of our library. You're getting more information. I would hate to take a book and if 10 people read it out of how many people have, we have 40,000 kids. If 10 parents didn't like that book in the library, it might not be that book should be in the library. It just don't let your child read that book. Maybe we have other procedures, but I worry that too many cooks. And again, if you want to put the titles out there as they're coming in, and parents want to take an active viewpoint of what their kids are reading, then they can. But for us to not let you order the books until we get that information in, I think there's going to be a lag time. And like you said, there are books there that kids need to connect with, because we have children out there that have lots of issues, and they might be looking for a book they can connect with. So that's what I'm concerned about, is the lag time of getting the books in the hands of the students. And I'm hoping there's books in the hands of the students. I bet you the reason you probably go through your libraries is and see that kids are not checking out many of the books over a long, several years of time.
That is definitely part of the normal weeding process to see this book is not interested in, it's not something that interests the student, so we pull it and look for a different title that's going to interest them. Yes, ma'am.
And
Go ahead.
we're saying that for these kids, for these titles to be on this list, they're not going to be inappropriate or have offensive or pornographic or anything like that. So if they're on this list, this is already, and if they were that, they're going to be crossed off and not be added to that list.
Absolutely. Every book that is added to our purchase list should be following whatever policy we as a district select, as well as, or define, excuse me, as well as our library book selection procedure, which goes into a little bit more detail on there. Again, it's not possible to necessarily catch every single book, but I think those two combined make a very strong way to ensure we're doing the very best that we possibly can for our students.
Dr. Jones, a lot of the books that are out there, they're pervasively vulgar. Would those books have made it if the procedure that we heard you guys talk about in March, if those procedures were in place, would those books have been approved in the library?
Some books would, some books would not. Some books would have been labeled as adult. And so because they were an adult interest level, that's going to take it out of the normal selection procedure and go to that little subset that says, all right, a library committee of 5 librarians is going to review that book.
So let's stop right there. So we're talking about minors. We're not talking about the public library or Amazon, whether this is a First Amendment right to publish or not. We're talking about, we are the ones that set the standards for Lamar. Is adult material, I don't mean war and guys get their head blown off, but is adult material appropriate for minors? And so why would we have a book in the library that's labeled adult? Which 18-year-old is just pining to read that book that he can't get down at the public library on Amazon? And I'm asking this rhetorically to help everybody think about this. We're talking about minors, pre-K to 18 years old. And those 18-year-olds are barely 18 before they walk out the door, and they're never here. And so, well, I don't know if you have a response to that or not, but.
Well, I do. So, I agree, we don't want pornographic material in our schools. And when I said that, I got some backlash for that too, when I said that publicly. But we do not want pornographic materials in our schools. We don't want anything that's rated adult for our kids to read. Anything I don't want my kids to read, I don't think it's good enough for anybody else's kid. One thing I want us to circle back around to is that I don't want us to forget that this system is not going to be 100% foolproof. That there will still be a book or two that will slip through the cracks, and that's why we have the system. So I want to make sure that no matter what the board decides to do, that we don't have the expectation that, okay, now there are normal books that will ever slip through the cracks.
Sure.
Because there will be, and so that's why I've asked for parents to partner with us and help us too. If one does slip through the cracks, let us know so we can put it through that vetting system. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear on that, because I hear us possibly getting to the point to where after we do all this, then we say, okay, we're done, and we shouldn't have any more issues. And that's not going to be the case. Something will happen because we have 500,000 books in the system. We're ordering all these books, and we don't have the manpower for everyone to read every single book that comes through. And we saw that 12 folks from the committee said, you know, we don't have the manpower to do that. And so I just want to make sure that we are clear on that.
So what was said earlier, though, is a lot of those folks who are librarians. So we're talking about, see, this is the way I approach it. I don't look at it as Dr. Nivens and this administration. I look at it as the role of the board generically and the role of the administration generically. We got here because past systems have failed us throughout the state, throughout the nation. And so I am trying to come at this from a little bit different perspective and say, you guys are still the experts. I still trust you as individuals, but there are some problems here. Let's make this a little more transparent. That's my approach. That's my approach, and every time I bring up something and I want the board to take more power that the administration currently has, that's my approach. Is, wait a minute, it's not about this administration, it's about the role of the administration, the role of the board. So I just see it a little different than Kay. Kay wants to trust you guys. I trust you as individuals. I like you all as individual folks. But it's about, we've had some problems in the past, and I'm wanting to put some more stopgaps in place.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because people have asked about our relationship.
It's not about that. I helped get this guy here. I like this man.
Yeah, we don't have an issue. But I will tell you this, Mr. Wells, is that the board, I'm going to say this for everybody because y'all already know, the board has three functions: hire and fire the superintendent, approve the budget, and adopt and create policy. And so, even though the committee decided to do this, if it is this committee's, you three, if you guys want the entire board to think about and investigate the purchasing or looking at the purchases a month out, that's your prerogative, because that's one of the three things you have. And you have one employee, which is me. And so if you guys say, Dr. Nivens, we'd like to see that list, then I give you the list. I mean, this is the committee recommendation. But these are people on the committee that some trustees have put on there and some people that have signed up to be on there. And I don't think everybody from the original one was able to come to this meeting. And so, you know, this is a smaller version of what happened at the very beginning. But again, if this is something that you three would like to see us do, or me do rather, because I'm the only one that works for you, then just let me know that. Or if you want the big board the entire board to consider, and just say that, and then Dr. Jones will make the adjustment, and then I'll bring it to the entire board at the next meeting.
Do you have anything else on this issue? I want to open up the floor to anybody in the room that'd like to speak for a few minutes, but I want you to finish.
I want to highlight just a few quick other things. Ebooks was specifically outlined in the TEA document as saying this should be considered for all these purchases. At the introduction of the document, it includes all library materials, and I like that. It's all encompassing, so now something can't fall through the cracks. Rather, if you start listing individual items, things can fall through the cracks. So I like the all-encompassing nature that it's written right now. The review piece is a little bit different. Reconsideration Committee has 10 days to complete the review. The committee, for the most part, all was in agreement that 10 days was very short. Whenever you consider things like staffing, testing windows, and so the way it's written right now is for X amount of, within a reasonable amount of time to get some feedback. The TEA document also specifically said 2 parents must be on the review committee. The TASB document, which they voted, in that one it was less unanimous. They liked that it was a little bit more open, that it can include parents and other groups. I will say that I think in practice parents would be involved in that. Then the material upheld for 1 year if it was upheld. The committee did not love the 10-year, generally speaking, of if a book was removed for a reason, it would be reinstated only after 10 years. The way the current document reads is it reads as the next time that things are up for review. In practice, probably if a book has been removed, it's not as likely that it's coming back into the library. But the idea of a set 10 years was a little bit off-putting for the committee. Schools will have a hard copy. I think unanimously, nobody wants hard copies. Everybody wants to be able to look things up online. And then the library collection review, that was also written in the TEA document biannually. The committee, I looked it up to make sure I understood biannually. That means twice a year to do a full inventory of the library. That's a lot of effort. And the committee agreed that an annual inventory, which is part of normal best practice anyways, was the best thing to do there. The last items that were included in the TEA document, just so you understand what these are, is text quest resources. The committee, for the most part, felt that should not be included in the policy. The key there is TextQuest is an approved consortium purchase of online databases that is put together by the Texas State Libraries and Archives Commission. It's a government entity that, due to gathering all of the resources of the state, they can get us great online digital resources. We do pay into TextQuest. It's like 24 cents a student versus if we were to pay it outright to try and get that, it would be something like $8 or $9 a student. It's a great deal for LCISD. It's great resources, great educational resources, but it's already gone through an approval process with the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. So the feeling there was that approval process didn't necessarily need to be in our policy since it's already walking through some state checks to ensure quality. So, in your document, in this lovely binder, I've got all the notes you could possibly want. Again, tab 8 is the clean version of the policy recommendation. Tab 9 is the annotated version, has all the notes inside of that version. And then tab 10 is the TEA version with any notes of why things were excluded from that version in the recommended version. So I think the committee would tell you that I'm really good at burning down trees. I like to bring in lots and lots of data to help everybody make good decisions. So, any questions?
Well, I came in here thinking I really like the TEA version better. It's stronger. I talked to, I'll say this, on May the 18th, well, a couple of days before May the 18th, I had some email correspondence with TASB, and I wanted to talk to the Lamar policy consultant. Well, she wrote me back and she said, we need to circle in Dr. Nibbins and Dr. Jones on this phone call. And I'm taken back a little bit by that. Texas Association of School Boards, I'm a school board member, I'm a member of this organization. I said, I don't understand that. So she wanted to have a full-blown conversation with the administration, which I have nothing to hide from the administration on this issue. But I didn't know if I was going to pursue that or not. But then her supervisor, Amy Kedlisek, is a lead policy consultant, is her title at TASB. She called me. And, well, she gave me her number and I called her. And I said, I just am looking for a basic summary of the differences between what the TEA has recommended and what TASB has recommended. And it took, several days and two different people to get that information. And she basically said that the TEA version has a lot more teeth and it has a lot more stopgaps in it. And I had already read it, and I had not read the TASB policy yet because it had only come out the day or two before. Since then, I've read the TASB policy, and I still lean heavily towards the TEA policy. I don't know if you two have read the TEA one and the TASB.
I haven't fully read the whole thing because I was on my phone reading it, traveling and all that. But
I read the TEA, I read the TASB. And then I was trying to compare it to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like what your committee did was so remarkable that you were really right up there with what's been coming down the pike. So it's like we could have written it for them. I don't have a problem with you wanting to send anyone, even board members, what are going to be titles of books that are going to be looked at to be purchased. I do have a problem with you having to hold up that purchase until the board convenes and votes. I feel like that could be a hiccup. And again, we're 7 people with 7 very different viewpoints. It's just like I was saying with you, everything is perspective. When you look at books, what I might think is that's okay. Somebody else says, I don't want my child reading that book. That looks good in this library. That does not look good in this library. So, and everyone should have their opinion, but I think what you set up was some safeguards against that, because you put enough people there with enough reviews that some of the reviews that were the areas you were going to go look at, it would clean books out before it even got to the point of being on the purchasing list. Am I correct in that assumption? So I just, especially with us opening up new schools and new libraries, I worry that we might be putting too much pressure by saying we have to look and review every title that comes through. I don't have a problem with you giving that to us, and if anybody wants to, and then give their feedback. But I think to have board approval on every single list can get kind of, I don't know, messy in my opinion, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you.
Again, publicly I'll say I do not want pornographic material in our schools. I don't, there are, if a parent decides that's what their child needs, there are other places they can get that, but when it has access to all of our students, and my babies included, I do not want any of that in there. So how we get there, and with these other safeguards that we're putting in, saying they review these people, we have 5 and 10 and all that, I will trust that for them to get on that purchasing list, that they must meet all these criteria. And if they don't meet these criteria, and if something does get by, like Dr. Niven said, there will be some stuff that slips through, but then that's where the accountability piece will come in afterwards. And if it does slip through, then we'll have a conversation of why in the heck did this slip through, and what are we putting in front of our minors? So I agree. There's 70,000 ways to skin a cat. That cat is going to get skinned one of those ways, but I don't want to skin a cat. But there are 70,000 different ways and 500,000 books. I mean, we want to go back and look at those 8 that we're reviewing now and see, okay, why are those in our schools if they really are pornographic or anything in that realm? And I'm sure they're having 500,000. There's probably more than just 8 that will need to be reviewed. But yeah.
And may I say, I appreciate the fact that you're not going to look at surrounding districts or surrounding opinions, that we're going to take it from our perspective, from our district, and from our students, and not let the voices or, when I went online and started looking at books that had been requested to be removed, I've read every one of them. Harry Potter, Divergent, Hunger Games, Charlotte's Web. I mean, you can find something wrong with every book that a group of people will not like. So we have to stay true to, and like you said, if it's a classic, what made it a classic? Do they still do Bluebonnet books?
Bluebonnet books are still a thing, yes ma'am.
And I used to read every Bluebonnet book with my children because I wanted to see what they were reading. Some of them were not that good. And I would have thought, how did this come through? But it was a Bluebonnet book, and they were asked to read them and win awards and everything and vote on them. And some of them were excellent. So, and I'm sure those are purchased in the libraries every year, especially are they not? No, are
not
they
necessarily.
I know they're in the public library for sure.
They're definitely in the public library, and you will see many of for example, the Bluebonnet books on there. But one key that I want to point out in here is in the selection criteria says one of the things to look for is an award-winning book. That does not equal you have to buy that book.
Right.
That's a criteria that you can look at and say, yeah, this is a book I should consider. But that does not mean it's a book that you're going to automatically check off and say this is something for our library.
Just like she just said, which I asked at the other meeting, award-winning means very little today, because what made it an award-winning?
Well, what is the award? Is it
I got a pulse. I get an award.
No,
I wrote and
but what
published.
used to be textbook, or, you know, they used to have the ones that you really looked for, and then I think all different people are coming out and giving you an award for whatever reason, and that doesn't mean it's a.
Award is not a free pass.
No.
Word is not free pass.
No, award is not a free pass. And the other thing I think we need to make sure we understand too, there are some kids, especially I'm sure in our district, that have no way to get to a public library. Their library, the only thing they have available to them is what's in our schools. And in the summertime, we have opened up some of our libraries. I don't know if we're doing that again this year.
We will open some of them this summer as well, yes, ma'am.
So that our students can continue to be able to get books into their hands.
Yes, ma'am. At the end of the day, all of this work is about getting great books to our kids and making sure that it's the right books. And so I appreciate the passion on either side of it, that it's because it's about getting books for our kids. And we want our kids reading. Readers are leaders, and we need lots of leaders.
So,
I'd like to, go ahead.
no, you-
I'd like to open up the floor to comments from the administration, or there's some folks here from the public here. If you would stand and say your name, talk for about 5 minutes or less. Just give us your thoughts, your opinions. If anybody is interested in doing that. Or you can save your comments or repeat it twice, today and next week at the board.
I have comments. I just wanted to say, I'm a parent of 8 children in the district, and I also work for the district. But y'all talked a lot about adding a lot more books to our libraries, and just as a parent, I would rather have my children read something that's a classic, or that I know has good content, than add all these other books that may be more shallow, and I don't know why we have to, push out the old books and bring in new books if we haven't read them. So I think it's important that we at least know what we're reading before we replace it with something that we're unsure of. And I have 5 children that are in secondary school, and 3 of them have told me about books that are inappropriate that they've checked out. So statistically, I don't think that's great. I don't think we should continue that way. I know we have policies now. They're supposed to help with that, but I think that without having someone read them, maybe we need to buy less books so that we can have more of them be read before we put them in the library. But I'd rather my children not read it and not get that information in their heads, because you can't take that out once they read it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to, Rebecca Clark, I was part of the committee with Chad and which ladies here, and of both committees, I was at both. So I just want to make sure you guys as board members understand, and anybody else here listening, because, Chad's got a lot of information to assemble and bring before you, but I feel like the full picture is not there. We need to remember, again, I've said this before, that TASB is a lobbyist group. They represent you guys, board members. Their job is not to represent children or parents. So personally, I find, and the fact that, as I mentioned at our meeting, for 8 months, they balked at pulling from the NSBA after, we were labeled parents like me, who you guys, won't look at or don't want to listen to, refuse to call us domestic terrorists or whatever, to try to, denigrate us so that we feel discouraged from coming. And it does work for some people. Finally, they pulled from NBSA, but I find the timing interesting because Abbott had asked, and I'm not a big fan of Abbott, I'm just going to go ahead and say that right now. I'm not a big fan of the guy, okay? But he did ask TASB repeatedly 2 times to voluntarily set up a vetting process to keep obscene content out of our public school libraries. And TASB, their quote, well, the first time they ignored it, so the second time we went public, and their response was, on November 3rd, we want to make clear that TASB has no regulatory authority over school districts and does not set the standards for instructional materials, including library books. Rather, we are a private, nonprofit membership organization focused on supporting school governance and providing cost-effective services to school districts, okay? So they said, we're not going to weigh in. I have my thoughts on why they chose to do that, but anyway, then when TEA came out with theirs, they magically all of a sudden wanted to weigh in. So I question their motives. They're sus to me, as my team would say. The TEA standards or policy was written by Marath, and I know that some of the SBOE members did have input on that, and they are elected. So I do know that for a fact, because I was told that by one of them. And it is, to me, far more robust. And I know that some of the other ones have mentioned the penal codes, but it is very specific, and I think it's beautifully written, and that's my opinion. Our policy, you know, we did the best we could. I wouldn't quite call us ragtag, but we were, you know, as administrators, libraries, parents, and students in the beginning, and that all dwindled, and, you know, then our second coming together, it was just, I think there's only 2 parents, me being one of them, the rest of them were administrators, librarians, whatever. So after only 4 meetings, 2 hours each meeting, minus the breaks we took, so maybe 14 to 15 hours total, we came up with what we did, and, you know, for the time that we took to do it, okay, you know, it's something. It's not compared to people who have spent months and time and who have far more breadth of knowledge about law and the responsibilities than we do, okay? And I'm not saying to blindly trust TEA or anything like that. I'm just saying you're not comparing apples to apples here. So, and again, on the book reviews, these things are not a valid metric. That is how a lot of this stuff has gotten in here. And even the librarians will tell you that they go by, they look at these book reviews, either in or the publisher's pages or the separate book reviews, and they'll give them, like me, Earl and the Dying Girl that I read, 4 out of 5 stars. If I can't, the awards, I mean, I can list them all here. We've got all these awards, including New York Times bestseller, but best fiction for young adults, 5 out of 5 stars, 4 out of 5 stars. That's not a metric because those people are pushing what they want to push, okay? So they're not looking at it from our perspective, and certainly not from the children's perspective. And I know that Chad did say that that's not, oh, it's out of order, we take it in, but it really isn't even a metric. It really shouldn't even be. So I feel that the system is inherently flawed. I'm not blaming it on anybody, it just is what it is. And, you know, I feel like we have an obligation, you have an obligation to Texas parents and students to ensure that, I was saying she's not looking. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you're looking right at me.
No, not you. That no child in Texas should be exposed to pornography or inappropriate content while in our schools. If they want to go home and read it to their kids, like I said, or they want their kids to, they can search it online. It's there. I mean, the excuse of, oh, I can't get to a public library. I mean, I'm just tired of the rationalization. It doesn't even, this has no weight. It carries no water. And so again, I like what Amber said about, you know, quality over quantity. I mean, we've got 500,000 books in the library, but we don't want to hold up on putting anything in that, you know, we don't want to vet them out properly because 500,000 books isn't enough for kids to have a pretty good sampling of books to take home and read. So it's not about perspective. This is about obscenity laws, okay? This is about pornographic and vulgar. We're not talking about, you know, whether you want your kids to read about magic or whatever else. I mean, those are things that's going to have to go through committee as well. But we're talking about violating Texas Penal Code 43.26. And we are currently looking, and I say we, several groups I'm working with, at civil or criminal liability and not exempting school board members and administration. So I'm just telling you, you don't want to be on the wrong side of this. It is a big problem, and we just want to protect the kids. It's not about keeping them from having fun or having books to read. It's like, I give this analogy. You take your kid to a nutritionist because you want your kid to get the best nutrition so they can grow, so they can, you know, and in their growing years have the best, and they're not eating right. You don't take them there, and then if they put before them, you know, here's some donuts, here's some ho-hos and some Twinkies and Ding Dongs, and then here's some steamed chicken and broccoli. Just take whatever you want. I mean, it's no big deal. It's all about what you think is best for you. I mean, you're going to take them, we're taking them to school because we want them to get educated with the best, okay? This stuff doesn't enrich it doesn't enrich the kids' education, and it's not necessary. It's extra. If that's something you're okay with, that's fine. But when they come to y'all, we want them to get the best. And then when they're on their own time, where they're older and grown out of the house, if that's the kind of stuff they want to put in their minds, fine, then they're an adult. These are not adults, these are children, so we're not comparing adult perspective to children's perspective. We're here to protect them.
Thank you.
All right.
So the next step, Mr. Chairman, is the committee can decide if they would like Dr. Jones to have the same presentation to the entire board, or present TEA's model, present CAS's model, present the committee's model. What's the direction of the committee?
I'll tell you guys what I would like, and you guys can tell me if you agree with it or not. I would like, this is very detailed, and I'm not opposed to anybody having this information who wants it. I think maybe a better plan for the meeting would be have the basic differences between what was done in March, what was put in place, and what extra benefits the TEA model would bring to that, contrasted with what are the best things that would come if we adopted the TASB model compared to it. I think that would be a good way to go.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I think, I mean, the work that the committee did, phenomenal.
Yes.
I mean, they were tasked with a goal and said, and they rock and rolled with it. I sent Dr. Nivens an email this past week about how can we get more parents involved on more committees, just because the validity and all the different viewpoints and all that. So, yeah, I mean, amazing work with this, to seeing the comparing. That's more than I anticipated. I think it would be good to have the other trustees to see the differences in all of it. It would be awesome if you can share that with the rest of the TA and TASB too. So I'm sure there's other districts having the same conversations. But yeah, the work you did is very good. But yeah, I would like the other trustees to have a rendition of this presentation and see.
I think every board member needs this book so that they can refer to it. I think if you will do like they said, more of a footnote version, and that way they can ask questions as more of an information, so they can know where we're coming from and where we're going and where we've been. And I think that way, if there's a question that comes up to them, they will know how to answer it.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the direction you need?
Yeah, so basically do this just a little bit lighter. So I heard.
Yep.
But yeah, when I walked in, you hinted this. I was like, man, I wish I would have this last week to review and prep and all that. So yeah, it's very good.
I do want to say I appreciate Dr. Jones and the committee and all the work that this has gone into this. I just want to say publicly that we're all fighting the same fight.
Yes.
I don't know of anyone in our district that wants our children to read photographic material. I don't know of anybody.
I've had a few parents that emailed me that said,
Well, yeah,
that's kind of funny, but.
I mean staff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Staff. I don't know of any staff members, because I've had those same parents that told me,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, and I said, well, we just have to disagree on that. I don't know any staff members that want our children reading kind of the material that's been read in our meetings before. I know that for a fact. And so we're fighting the same fight. I think where we just have to compromise and align on is, how do we fight that fight? You know, what's the process we use to fight that fight? And whatever it is, whatever the board's desire it is, I'm going to do. I was going to make sure I say it out loud that it's not going to be foolproof. I don't want the false expectations on my librarians or the teachers that says we put this in place, now nothing will ever happen again, because there's only one perfect person that I know that walked this earth. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that something will slip through the cracks, but we have a process in place, and we want to partner with our parents and our community members that when they see it, say something. And when you say something, we're not going to say, oh my God, here you go again. It's not going to be that. It's Dr. Jones, I found this book, you guys want to vet it because it has some inappropriate material in it. And then we put it through the system. And once we all understand that, we're on the same page, the same team, our kids see that, and then our kids understand the best way to disagree also, and the best way to get along with each other. You know, we have to be the example for our kids. And so we just have to come up with this process. And so we have the direction that this committee wants to go at the meeting, and we'll do that next week.
And the best way to always get along with people you disagree with is just to agree to disagree in the end. And I think some of our parts of our society have lost that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the Lamar administration for hearing me, what probably appears like a rant at times. That is not the intent. I'm coming from a good place, and I hope all of you all appreciate that.
And what I meant by perspective is that what some of the people calling you, what they might think they label pornographic and what you label pornographic, again, we can agree, no, we don't want some of that in our schools, but where some parents take it to what level and where we take it to some level is going to be different. So we have to understand that different people see things in different ways and not be judgmental, but just say, for our purposes, this is where we stand.
Because we are the ones that uphold this community standard.
That's right.
And for
But
society.
that's what I mean by perspective, and I'm sorry if you didn't quite understand that.
Can I ask if the book that Ms. Clark read at our school board meeting a couple months ago, is that still in our libraries, or has that been pulled, or is that part of those 8 books?
That's part of the review group.
That's in
That's in process.
In process. So
Yeah.
whenever it's in process, is it temporarily? Was it removed at that
That
point?
title is, yes, sir.
So it's no longer, that was no longer available whenever it was brought to our light.
Yes, sir.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, Dr. Jones and his team, they act very swiftly, and I've always appreciated that about him. He's very swiftly and very professional about it too. So.
Good.
All right, we have 2 other things on the agenda.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Next is, I asked for a review of our Pledge of Allegiance policy. What we do, what we require of students, what we require of students who don't want to honor the flag, and others who might not want to honor the flag as well and are disruptive at the same time. Just kind of an overview of what we can do and can't do.
Yes, sir. All right, so it's a great introduction. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So, I guess I will sit. So to kind of give some context, we really dug into this today, and Lamar actually talked to our legal counsel, and they brought up the fact that as of today, the Texas Education Code of 25.082 has not been challenged in the state of Texas. The reason I bring that up is because I'd like to tell you what 25.082 is. That the Board of Trustees at each school district shall require students once during each school day at each campus to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag and the Pledge of Allegiance to the Texas flag as well. And with that, here is that policy. This is EC Legal, that is our current policy here in Lamar CISD. The legal policy states, a board shall require students once during each school day to recite the pledges of allegiance to the United States and Texas flag. It goes on to say, on written request from students, parents, or guardian, a district shall excuse the student from reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, in the past, this issue has come to light before. In 2016, this was a kind of a conversation discussion among cabinet members in Lamar CISD, and this was the procedures that were rolled out in response to that. They included to address on an individual basis with each student, to not cause a disruption or try to force the student to participate, and this is for those students who are not willing or were not standing or doing the Pledge of Allegiance. At that time, no disciplinary actions were taken against the student, and then right afterwards, the teachers or staff were then to contact the student's parents to say if this is going to continue, if this is your wishes, we would need a written statement to match up with our EIC policy. We did, from some feedback, want to offer some updates to these procedures. And as you can see, there was one major update. That update is at the bottom. So if needed, initial disciplinary actions are addressed by the classroom teacher for those students. And as we discussed this more, we even knew that there were some concerns about substitute teachers coming into our buildings. Well, we just want to reiterate, it would not be our expectations of substitute teachers to deal with the students for this type of behavior, because substitute teachers would not have that information to know if a parent had given a note, and so we wouldn't want to put that on the shoulders and cause other issues. But we would ask them that they leave notes and leave communication back to the classroom teacher, and thus when the classroom teacher comes back into the classroom, they would be the ones handling the situation. And thus, we kind of we would recommend that we currently have the policy in place that follows the Texas Education Code. We feel that it would suffice. We do agree that we could tighten up some areas of the practices and procedures and enforcing the EC legal policy. And so now I'd like to open up to any discussion or questions.
The question that continues to come to me from one of our substitute teachers, who's very passionate about this.
Yes, sir.
Is what do you do about this, mostly the secondary student, who's not only not standing, that's his or her prerogative, but is disrupting or interfering with the others honoring the flag?
And so that would be really a student who is not compliant, a student who is not listening, following procedures or directions. That can be addressed as a discipline concern for those students during that time.
So that's how a teacher would,
Yes, sir.
would handle that.
Yes, sir.
Alert the campus administration, I think.
Usually, in general, we start with the teacher in the classroom. They're the ones who handle a majority of the situations of discipline infractions in the classroom. We would start with the teacher. If it continues repetitive or it starts to escalate, of course, then campus administrators will be there to help.
No, to clarify what Mr. West is asking, I think, it's like, say for instance, I'm a sub in the classroom, we're doing the pledge, and little Roosevelt wants to be disruptive while we're doing the pledge. As a substitute teacher, what do I do?
So as a substitute teacher, because they're being disrupted, they would be the ones that go over and talk to the student at this time. Don't be disrupted during the class time, because that is a time for the pledge of allegiance to occur for the students. And if it becomes escalated, then of course they can contact their campus administrator to come down and work with that student.
So like any procedure, any disruption.
So I would classify it as any classroom disruption.
Yes.
Yeah. Any classroom disruption means if I have to stop what I'm doing to correct you, that's a disruption. And so we have to stop the pledge, or we're doing the pledge, I have to stop pledging allegiance to come correct you, then that's a disruption. And then we have a campus process for that. The main thing I want to clarify is when we talk, so this really processes for the student. When I got here last year, I met a student who was protesting Pledge of Allegiance. And she was very peaceful about it. She just sat down quietly, turned her back, and I saw that when I was doing my little visit around the district when I got here last year. And so that's what we're talking about. If you have that situation where a student is not being disruptive, we don't want the teacher to incite that. We don't want the sub to incite that, because then you don't know what's going to happen after that. But let alone, you deal with the kid later on after the fact. You do your classroom management strategies. Teachers will do that. If it's a substitute teacher, then our expectation is the sub to note that in the notes and tell the teacher, the regular classroom teacher, hey, Ms. Cole-Hamilton, yesterday Roosevelt would not stand for the pledge. It wasn't disruptive. We want to make sure we say that, because if Ms. Cole-Hamilton comes back and he says that, then she's going to give me a consequence because she thinks I was disruptive. So we have to make sure that we understand what that means.
I would say too, Mr. Bates reached out to our area superintendents and talked with the principals, and as of today, and hearing back, there was no major concerns about this going on.
We haven't had any. This is like the only time we've had even just a conversation about it from one person.
Yeah.
We haven't had any of these conversations.
And I requested it on here just because I didn't know, and I'm just trying to understand. I'm at work during the school day, so anybody in the committee have any
Just
comments?
and this was elementary, we always had some for religious reasons, would not say the pledge. Never said anything, parents would tell us as teachers. Sometimes we made notes in our book, in our grade book, in case we were out. Most of the time the kids just stood and stood quietly. They never made, whatever they did, and none of the kids, of course, in elementary said anything. So, but it's been going on for years that there's been kids not saying the pledge.
Sure.
That's just the way it is.
And I know that there's nothing we can do about that. I guess
But disruptiveness,
The disruptiveness.
but being disruptive in any level, for
Right.
whatever reason, is
Right.
not acceptable.
So I want to make sure we're clear too, because if a student is not being disruptive, we're not going to, if the student doesn't stand, we're not going to escort the student out in the hall.
Yeah.
Because now we don't have anybody
That's
monitoring. We don't have any supervision in the hall. You know what I mean?
Right.
So as long as the student is being compliant, they're going to stay in the classroom because that's where the supervision is. Yeah.
Exactly.
I would say, being married to a teacher in our district, she has voiced that, there are situations she has had to deal with, like the students were being disruptive and all that, but it was also one of those things where, like, got a student disrupted fighting, or I got disrupted to be this. I'm gonna choose my lesser of my two issues and let that one slide, and then focus in on the major disruption things. But I mean, there is that somewhat attitude and the lack of respect in some areas too. But
Yeah.
that's in every area. We have to address respect.
And one of the things I'll say here publicly that I told Dr. Nivens was, I've talked to Joy as well on the board about maybe putting together like a patriotic type video that kind of instills why we are patriotic, and maybe have some of the ROTC students throughout the district be in that video, and some different faculty and maybe people who served in the military in the past. It's like, this is why we're standing for the pledge, guys. You can still not stand, but this is why we're doing it. It's kind of instilling a little. That's healthy for a society, for the culture. Thank you, sir. The next thing is about school colors and mascot selection. I did not realize that. I've read the policy, but I forgot that the board names schools, but the board does not, that policy does not necessarily say that the board approves the mascots, but in the past, all of my time in the past, that's just been part of it. So now I think because of the way political correctness has gone in our country in the last couple of years, a lot of different schools have changed mascots, and I always see that from a perspective of the elected officials of the district. The board makes those decisions, and so I am of the desire to codify that in our board policy, and so that's why I've asked it for here. We'll talk about that a little bit.
So I asked Mr. Croft to come because he's just recently went through this process. He's the new principal at Fayetteville, and so to go through the process of what he did to select the mascot for Fayetteville.
Thank you. You asked the mascot.
Hold that thought. I'm gonna have to lock it out.
No, it's out in Dulles. We're not using any of our LCS schools. Baseball, the summer league for Randall. It's our first.
Can't see.
Yeah,
Chad,
got a
'cause I
left
can't
fielder.
see this.
We'll see if he plays left field
In
tonight.
front of my window.
There was some talent out there last night. I practiced, I was like, okay, some of these boys can throw the ball. Yeah,
This is yours.
we got some athletes out there.
For some reason, it's not.
That was my first look at it.
Go ahead and tell them about the process.
Oh, okay. My name is Kevin Croft. I was principal of Poly. I'm now the principal of Phelan Elementary. And so the process, the colors are almost, they're not almost, they are in line with the track itself. So I have versions of blue inside the school. And then it went to what do we want the mascot to do? And there wasn't a whole lot of policy about this. And so I did interviews, I talked to Miss Phelan, I went and ate lunch with her and asked her what she would like.
Isn't she a trip?
She's a spitfire of a woman. She was outrunning me at some point. So I asked her what would she like, what's an animal that you would like. Then I interviewed some kids at school and asked them what they would like. And then so it came out to, I narrowed it down to 4 was pretty common. And then from that, I went and sent out a survey to parents. I had them fill it out and got those numbers. And then I personally went to the elementary schools to introduce myself on because they don't know who I am. And then I got their paper ballots from there. I figured that was an easier route than trying to do it electronically with 500 kiddos. And so in the end, it 2 completely fell off almost immediately. They were not getting the buy-in. And the 2 that sat at the top, they sat within 100 votes of each other the entire time. And then I extended the window open to parents a little longer because I just hadn't gotten enough, I didn't feel like I had gotten enough votes to really go, this is what we want as a community, so I left it open for another week after that. And then I started mass communicating, please vote, I need your votes, please vote for the mascot. And then it ended up being, the Knights did end up winning by 87 votes, and that's off the top of my head, it was somewhere in that number.
The Phelan Knights is a
Knights and shine.
Knights and
Yes. And interestingly, how that kind of went about, it was introduced to me, and then I started looking up character counts to kind of, I was trying to make things align around, well, Knight's Code and character counts are pretty close. I mean, they talk about the same thing, fairness, citizenship, taking care of people, honor, respect. So it made sense to me once.
What was the second place?
Owls.
Oh.
And owls are very wise. You know, there's a lot of cool things about them as well. And I think Dr. Mossage called me one day to ask me, hey, where's it going? And like I told her, you can put slugs up there, it doesn't matter to me. I'm still going to make it work on my end. Oh my gosh. Something on me.
How many parents?
It ended up being 200, 220, somewhere in that area. It ended up being over 400 kiddos. So it was about 600 overall.
That's good. That's a lot of good.
And that's why I left the parent one on longer, because we were sitting at like 130, and I didn't like that. It needed to be enough where parents weren't upset. And I did hold my first meet and greet with parents in Miranda this week, and when I announced that it was the Knights, I got an applause. So I was like, okay, you weren't the Owl folks. Perfect. Or that 19 people that voted for the Mavericks. Yeah.
Terry, use the computer arrow.
Oh.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Guru said, hey, if you ever see me in pictures of Polly Ryan, every picture I've got a thumbs up, so you put that in there for me. It still didn't go. And I was asked how I got the Knights from the horses, so I was trying to stay consistent. At one point, it was a jousting. Well, then I started thinking, I don't want weapons in a kid's deal, so remove the joust. Let's put Phelan Elementary there. And Mr. Guru is working on a knight on a horse, but the stick will be a flag that says PK on it for Phelan Knights.
Gotcha. But then it's still staying going with the stampede, because y'all are the blue stampede.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, they say that every time I call them. It's been pretty cool. They never said that on the maroon track. So that ended up, I put that in there just to kind of show you. You see the yellow and the gray, that's your Knights and Owls. They were close, but the other two didn't even make it out of that.
So as you're doing this process, you're relaying back either to your area superintendent or to Dr. Mossage, so it's never done in a vacuum. So if there's something they think maybe y'all are going off a little track.
Oh no! Before I even put that these were my four, I talked to everyone that I could talk to about it. It was my area soup, other principals, like, oh, do you see any signs? I asked my core team to go, do you see anything that is going to, like you said earlier, are we going to put one group where they're feeling uncomfortable? Because I don't want any of that. We can't start the year off like that, so it's got to be completely 100% neutral. And so when the Knights came up, it was, well, what about ladies? So I did research on that. Well, ladies they were called dames during that time. They were still part of that group, though they did still fight war. So that, for me, was even more inclusive. And then every culture has a form of knight. So it was really, weirdly, I spent a lot of time on this. It was very difficult to kind of really narrow it down, but I spent a lot of time making sure that I was doing right by my community.
Well, that's great, because it's going to be around for a long time.
Right, forever.
So
And I
good.
didn't want the community, I didn't want anyone upset with me before I started the game, because then I'm already trying to go uphill, and I don't want that. It needs to be everyone on.
I was part back in the day when Navarro was in elementary school. We were the Navarro Knights, and yes, and it was purple because the counselor and I liked purple, and we moved over from Bowie where we were the purple Bowie Dragons. So there was very little guidance. We just got, so I like that there. And then when we moved to Austin Elementary, it was between the Cowboys and the Astronauts, and we let the kids vote. And it was
That's where my names came from. kiddos, well, for the exception of Miss Faith.
Right.
But it was me asking kids, what do you think sounds right? And they, of course, everyone goes through the alliteration, but the falcon's already taken, so that one was out. Then it gets into like ferrets, frogs, some other weird toads I haven't heard of, and so it just kind of puttered out after that. So it's like, okay, what is going to represent what we want to represent? And then so when I started asking kids, they would ask, what's your vision? Of course, I would kind of give them a little viewpoint of that, and they go, here's what I think it would be. And then some of you can go, never gonna happen, all right?
Yeah.
But then some were like, hey, let me ask a couple of people about that. But yeah, I talked to Dr. Waits, Mrs. Parks frequently about, you know, what do you think about this? What am I gonna run into? And then I sent that out to principals. What am I gonna get hit with? Because like you were talking about perspective, my perspective is one way, but someone else will have a different one. And so,
And you know, she was big with Shakespeare. That was one of the literature, not just Shakespeare, Phelan, and teaching the Greek gods.
yeah, Romeo and Juliet.
That was,
I talked to her today about some other stuff I was kind of bending her ear on a little bit. And I told her there was night and she yelped on the other end. So I was like, okay, well at least Mrs. Phelan's happy about it.
My desire is not to take over the process of getting to the meeting. My desire, guys, is to let it be part of the consent agenda to where we can, in case somebody's really got something that's come up, go, wait a minute.
what is it
This-
right now? Because is it just an information item that we put in there, or has it been voted on? I thought it was always consent agenda, not consent, it was just an information item.
Yeah, so my understanding in the past, it was like consent agenda.
Okay,
And then coming in, I say, you know, we blurred the lines, and then we ask the trustees to do things that are superintendent's role, and then the superintendent does things that are superintendent's role. And so this was not a policy, and so then I made an information item for the trustees to know.
okay.
My thoughts are, when thinking about this process, if we can somewhat decide it before design phase, because you go up through Randall and Wright right now, and there's blues and greens on the panels, and out throughout the school, there's blues and greens, but their colors are silver and black.
Yeah,
So for
we
school
changed
pride, all that kind of stuff. So I think coincidentally, Morgan does have a shade of purple inside the school, but that was pure coincidence.
We've changed that, and that was brought to my attention when I first got here, because Foster is green, but their colors are black and gold. And so now the colors are part of the design.
Yeah.
And so.
So
the
this,
design-
a new school will be built, it'll be whatever it is, say it's a green high school, then in the design, it'll be green.
Mhm, that's right.
Because you'll know right away what
Right.
color track
Of
it's
course,
going.
of course.
Except it's a high school, because then it's gotta come up
It'll
with
set that color track.
It'll set,
Yeah.
Okay.
we don't have.
What do you guys think of the idea of amending the current policy, which says the board has the right to name, or the board names the schools, to just amending it and approve the mascots? That's my desire here, is just to be the final backstop, to put in code what we've done in the past, before fate.
As long as it doesn't slow down the process for the people to start ordering stuff. As long
And I think
as-
that's what jammed me up a little bit this time, is I'm running out of time, especially with supply chains and things of that nature. I need to start building shirts now, and I think that's really it was a very quick process, because I was hired after spring break, and so I had to get everything set up.
That's the drawback, but if it's something you know.
If you're getting hired in January, yeah, you would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that could be, whether we put our stamp of approval on it and say, yes, do that, but at design time or naming time, even naming time, because naming happens way before design, right?
Yeah.
No.
Well, we have prototypical schools, but you know, if we change the prototype, then yeah.
Yeah.
So it just depends. I know in the past we've hired the principal 6 months out, and I've changed that to go a little bit later, because I don't know if they're running their campus and open up another school for a whole semester. You know, and so that's hard to do.
But
So
just like,
again, it's the committee, you know, whatever you guys want to present, and then Mr. Bates will talk to CASB and get a policy consultant to revise it.
I know whenever we do namings, the communications team do the diligence to make sure that there's nothing in someone's closet, right?
Right.
So I assume that with mascots and all that, for all that public, all the diligence is done as well.
Yep. Yes.
I wouldn't mind with elementary, like you're saying, you're on a time frame. Whereas the high schools, they usually name their principals almost a year in advance, right? So they have plenty of time. I would almost want us to give power to our superintendent that unless there's a concern, he can make the approval like we do with personnel. I don't know, I hate for you to be waiting till the next board meeting. Because like you said, didn't that come to us in April or May? When did we?
It would have been a.
May,
It was, it was an information item,
in May.
no,
It went through the LPE.
when did I forgot.
It was after spring break.
I forgot when we sent that to, yeah. It was sometime this spring, but yeah.
I think if we do anything, it needs to be in a timely fashion.
Right, I agree with that.
So your idea is to not do it for the elementaries, but have board approval for secondary? Is that what you're saying?
I split that up,
I would, yeah, I wanted just a simple amendment to the policy is my desire.
but that it just comes to the board.
Just
for
comes to
board
the board, just like
as
it
a-
does in the
as a
board
consent.
approval.
So they'll do all their diligence.
However they do it is
Yeah,
their,
like, I don't
is their
wanna-
business.
I don't want to take away the community listening aspect.
I love
No,
that
no, no,
aspect.
Okay.
no.
So,
I
However
think it's
they
just
decide.
that
Right.
when it comes down to it, if somebody asks why did it go that way, well, the board did know. And that's, when you
Yeah.
approve it, it shows that. But we just have to do better diligence to not have you backed up, because you, like you said, you're ordering.
Oh, no, ma'am, I did that on my own. I wanted to stay in Poly for a little longer, so no one in this room did anything.
No, but I don't want.
Waiting on me,
but-
it was me wanting to make sure my people were taken care of before I jumped over.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
It's
So,
gonna, so if you want to put something in there, I don't have a problem with it, as long as it doesn't hold up the process for the different schools. We just need to make sure it comes to us in a timely fashion.
Mr. Gates,
Not a problem.
it's on you, sir.
And we're gonna have a lot of these coming up.
Anybody else have anything? Policy committee. Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.